My name is Bella, I'm 21 years old, and I never thought my life would turn into something out of a twisted novel. You know that moment when everything you believed about your family, the trust, the love, the support, crumbles in an instant? That moment happened to me on the cold floor of my university lecture hall. I had fainted. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe the malnourished diet of ramen and coffee, I wasn't sure. What I do remember is the blinding fluorescent lights as I woke up in the infirmary, my head pounding, and 4 drip attached to my arm. The doctor's face was calm but concerned. He asked me for my parents' number, and even though I felt ashamed, I gave it. He called. I listened. And then I waited. Hours passed. Nurses came in and out. Students peeked through the door. But my parents never came. It stung at first, but I swallowed it. I told myself they were busy, maybe caught in traffic, maybe something important came up. I've always been good at making excuses for them. But that night, lying in bed still feeling weak, I saw a photo online that froze me cold. There they were, my mom in a sparkling red dress, my dad in a suit he hadn't worn since my high school graduation. Both of them holding wine glasses, their smiles wide and careless. The caption under the photo read, "Finally enjoying life." That was the moment something in me cracked. I stared at the screen, my chest tight, but I said nothing. No confrontation, no text, no call. Just silence. Days passed. My body recovered slowly, but my heart didn't. I kept telling myself I didn't need them, that maybe I was better off without the disappointment. But then my phone lit up one night. 38 missed calls. My father's last message glared at me like a siren. "We need you. Answer now." And without thinking twice, I grabbed my jacket, shoved my phone into my pocket, and left my dorm. The night air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside the dorm. My legs still felt shaky, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I didn't know what I was running into, but 38 missed calls from my father wasn't normal. He wasn't the type to beg. I called him back, my hands trembling so much I nearly dropped my phone. It rang once before he answered. "Bella?" His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "Where are you?" "At campus," I said, out of breath. "What's going on?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear muffled voices, panic in the background, maybe even my mother crying. Then Dad said, low and strained, "Don't ask questions. Just come home. Now." The line went dead. I froze on the sidewalk, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to let them deal with whatever crisis they had, the way they let me deal with mine alone in that hospital bed. But curiosity, and something deeper, maybe a buried sense of duty, dragged me forward. I caught the last bus to the neighborhood where I grew up. Every mile that passed, my mind kept replaying that image of them smiling at the party, living their best lives while I was hooked up to 4 fluids. Anger burned hot in me, but I couldn't shake the unease in my stomach. When I finally reached my street, I noticed something strange. My parents' house, the one with the perfectly trimmed hedges and the porch light that always flickered, was surrounded by police cars. Blue and red lights bounced off the windows like a warning. I stepped off the bus, my throat dry. 2 officers were talking on the lawn, their faces tight. Before I could move closer, someone grabbed my arm. I turned, startled, to see my mom. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged, and her eyes red from crying. I had never seen her like this, undone. "Bella," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank God you're here. We need you." And in that instant, I realized that whatever was happening wasn't about them wanting me. It was about them needing me for something I wasn't sure I wanted to give. My mom's grip on my arm was so tight it hurt, but I didn't pull away. I just stared at her, waiting for an explanation. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Her lips trembled, and for a second I thought she might hug me, but she didn't. Instead, she looked over her shoulder toward the flashing lights, her whole body tense. "It's your father," she whispered. "Something happened. Please, come inside." I followed her up the walkway, past the officers who gave me the kind of look that makes your stomach twist. They knew something I didn't, something bad. My heart pounded harder with every step. Inside, the living room looked like a crime scene from TV. Papers were scattered across the coffee table, broken glass sparkled on the carpet, and one of the dining chairs was overturned. The house that usually smelled of lemon polish and candles now smelled like sweat, fear, and stale alcohol. And there, slumped on the couch with his head in his hands, was my dad. I had never seen him like that, defeated, pale, older than I remembered. When he looked up and met my eyes, I froze. His face wasn't just tired. It was scared. "Bella," he said, his voice rough. "I'm sorry. I should have come when you fainted. I should have been there." For a second, anger flared up inside me. The apology I had wanted for so long finally came, but it wasn't enough. Not now. Not when I was standing in a house full of police officers, wondering what the hell my family had gotten into. "What happened?" I demanded. He hesitated. His eyes flicked toward my mom, then back to me. "We're in trouble. The kind of trouble we can't get out of without you." I shook my head, confused. What does that even mean? Before he could answer, an officer stepped inside. "Mr. and Mrs. Martin, we need to continue the questioning. Miss, you may want to stay close. This concerns you too." I blinked. Me? Whatever this was, it wasn't just about them. Somehow, I was tied into it. And in that moment, I realized the betrayal I had felt earlier was only the beginning. Something darker was waiting for me. The officer led us into the kitchen, where two detectives sat at the table. Their notepads were open, pens ready, their expressions unreadable. My mom sat down quickly, wringing her hands, while my dad stayed standing, arms crossed like he was trying to shield himself. I lingered near the doorway, my pulse racing. "Bella, right?" one of the detectives asked, looking up at me. He was tall, with gray hair and a deep line across his forehead. "You should sit. This concerns you more than you think." I hesitated before sliding into a chair across from him. "What's going on?" He exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking. "Earlier this evening, your parents' home was broken into. Not random, targeted. Nothing valuable was taken, but," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "A note was left. And your name was on it." I felt my stomach drop. "My name?" The second detective, a woman with sharp eyes, slid a clear evidence bag across the table. Inside was a crumpled piece of paper. I leaned forward to read the shaky handwriting. "This is only the beginning. Tell Bella she owes us." My throat tightened. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. My parents stayed silent. They wouldn't even look at me. "Your parents have been under investigation," the detective continued, his voice steady but firm. "We believe they've been involved with people they shouldn't have been. Tonight's incident proves those people are escalating. And now they've dragged you into it." I turned to my mom and dad, my voice rising. "Involved with who? What did you do?" My dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with regret. "Bella, years ago, before you were even in high school, your mom and I made some bad decisions. Financial decisions. We borrowed money from people we couldn't pay back. We thought we could fix it, thought it would go away. But it didn't. And now, they want you." "Me?" I snapped. "Why me?" My mom's voice cracked. "Because you're the only leverage we have left. They know hurting us doesn't matter, we've lost everything already. But you? You're our weakness." I felt the room spin. First they abandoned me in the hospital, now they were telling me strangers were threatening my life because of their mistakes. Something inside me hardened right then. I wasn't going to be their pawn. Not for anyone. I didn't know how yet, but in that moment, I decided one thing for certain: whoever was behind this would regret ever putting my name on that note. The detectives kept asking questions, scribbling down notes, but I barely heard them. My focus was on my parents, the people I thought I knew. Who are these people? I asked finally, my voice low but sharp. Names. Tell me. My dad rubbed his temples like he could erase the mess he'd created. They're not the kind of people you talk about openly, Bella. They run things under the table: illegal loans, gambling, laundering. We thought we could borrow a little, pay it back, and walk away. He looked at me with eyes so tired they barely looked like his anymore. But no one walks away. The female detective leaned in. We believe the group your parents are talking about is connected to organized crime in the state. Small time, but dangerous. They've been on our radar for a while. Tonight's break-in means they're escalating, and if they put your name on that note, it's no longer just your parents' problem. It's yours. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. So let me get this straight. They screw up, and now I'm the one in danger? I was in the hospital last week and they didn't even show up. But now they expect me to pay for their mistakes. Neither of them denied it. That silence was louder than anything. The detectives exchanged glances again. The older one said, "We can put protection on you, Bella. But you need to cooperate. If you know anything, anyone your parents met with, anything unusual you've seen, we need it." My parents looked at me like I was suddenly the answer to everything. Like the daughter they ignored, the one they left behind, was now their salvation. And for a moment, I wanted to walk out that door and never come back. Let them deal with the fallout. But something inside me shifted. The anger I'd been swallowing for years twisted into something sharper: resolve. These people had dragged me into their war, written my name down like I was nothing but collateral. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. I didn't say it out loud then, but I made a silent promise: I'd find out who these people were, what they wanted, and I'd make them regret ever thinking they could use me as leverage. That night, after the detectives finally left, the house felt heavier than ever. My parents barely spoke, and I stayed in my old bedroom, unchanged since high school, like a shrine to a girl who didn't exist anymore. The walls were still covered with photos, debate team ribbons, and graduation announcements. But sitting there now, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I couldn't sleep. The note, my name scrawled across it, replayed in my mind over and over. "Tell Bella she owes us." Why me? At 3 a.m, I sat at my desk with my laptop. If the police couldn't tell me much, I'd find out myself. My parents thought they could keep me in the dark, but I wasn't a little girl anymore. I started with old financial records I remembered my dad keeping in a desk drawer. When they finally went to bed, I crept downstairs and dug through the papers. Credit card bills, overdue notices, loan applications, most of it normal debt, but buried in the stack I found something different. A contract. Handwritten. No official company name, just a signature at the bottom: M. Russo. My heart skipped. I had never heard the name before, but it sounded dangerous, like something out of a crime novel. Next to the signature was a number: $75,000. I took a photo of the paper and tucked it back before anyone noticed. Back upstairs, I searched. It took hours, but eventually I found him. Marcus Russo. Not a businessman. Not even close. A man tied to illegal gambling rings, money laundering, extortion. Arrested twice but never convicted. A ghost who always slipped through the cracks. My parents owed him. And now, because they couldn't pay, he was coming after me. I sat back in my chair, the screen glowing against my tired face. My parents were too weak, too scared to fight this. But me? I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life waiting for Marcus Russo to show up at my door. For the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. If he wanted me involved, fine. I'd get involved. But not as his victim. As his enemy. By morning, I had a plan forming in my head. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I wasn't going to sit in that house waiting for Russo to make his next move. If I was going to take him down, I needed to know everything about him, how he operated, who worked for him, where his weaknesses were. Over breakfast, my parents watched me carefully, like I was a fragile glass about to shatter. But they had no idea what was really going through my mind. Bella, my dad started cautiously, the detectives think you should lay low for a while. Maybe stay with a friend. Somewhere safe. I stared at him, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Safe? Did he really think hiding would solve this? And what about you? I asked. You think Russo will just forget about me if I disappear? He won't. You know that. They both went silent. Good. At least they understood. That afternoon, I reached out to the one person I trusted outside my family, Claire, my best friend from university. She was sharp, fearless, and more importantly, she owed me after I'd helped her through a bad breakup last semester. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to get her attention. Claire, I need your help. And you can't ask too many questions right now. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, Bella, what did you get yourself into? Not me, I said bitterly. My parents. But it's my problem now. She sighed. All right. What do you need? Information. On a man named Marcus Russo. Within hours, Claire came through. She had a cousin who worked at a law firm, and while nothing official could be shared, whispers always leaked. Russo ran an underground casino in the city, tucked behind a restaurant called La Serrata. It was invite-only, hidden in plain sight, but everyone who went there knew exactly whose pocket they were filling. That was my in. That night, as I lay awake, I made another silent promise. I was going to walk into Russo's world, learn everything I could, and find the crack in his empire. And when I found it, I'd make him regret ever writing my name. 2 nights later, I stood outside La Serrata, the kind of restaurant that looked expensive enough to scare off anyone who didn't belong. Italian marble steps, gold-lettered signage, and 2 men in dark suits standing at the entrance. To anyone else, it looked like a fine dining spot. But I knew better. Behind those walls was Russo's playground. I had dressed carefully, nothing flashy, but enough to pass for someone who might belong. Black dress, heels, hair pinned neatly. Claire had lent me her cousin's ID badge from a catering gig she once worked here. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than showing up with nothing. My palms were sweating when I walked up the steps. One of the men at the door gave me a quick look up and down. Reservation? He asked flatly. I smiled like I'd done this 100 times. I'm here to meet someone inside. Private room. He narrowed his eyes, but when I flashed the badge, his expression softened just slightly. He stepped aside, and just like that, I was in. The restaurant itself was quiet, polished, almost sterile. But down the back hallway, past the kitchen doors, things changed. The air grew smoky, louder. I followed the sound of clinking glasses and laughter until I reached a heavy door guarded by yet another man. He didn't even ask questions, just opened it, and I stepped into another world. The underground casino. Bright lights from slot machines, green felt poker tables, the smell of cigars and whiskey. Men in tailored suits and women in glittering dresses moved around like sharks, their eyes sharp, their laughter too loud. Money was everywhere, stacks of it passed across tables like candy. I forced myself to walk slowly, casually, even though my heart was hammering. I wasn't here to play. I was here to watch. To learn. And then I saw him. Marcus Russo. Mid-50s, silver hair slicked back, a tailored suit that probably cost more than my parents' car. He sat at a poker table surrounded by men who looked more like bodyguards than gamblers. He was laughing, but there was nothing warm about it. It was the laugh of a man who owned everything in the room. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the man whose name had turned my life upside down. He didn't know me yet. But soon, he would. I lingered near the bar, pretending to study the cocktail menu while stealing glances at Russo's table. Every movement he made radiated control, how he leaned back in his chair, how the men around him laughed a beat too late, like they were waiting for his permission. I couldn't just walk up to him. That would get me thrown out, or worse. I needed an angle. So, I started with the bartender. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with sleeves rolled up and a sharp eye on the crowd. When I ordered a drink, I slipped in a casual question. "Busy night?" I asked, my tone light. He smirked. "Always busy when the boss is here." "The boss?" I echoed, feigning ignorance. He tilted his chin toward Russo's table. "Marcus. Don't tell me you came here without knowing who runs this place." I gave him a small smile. "Guess I know now." It wasn't much, but it was something, a confirmation that Russo wasn't just a name here, he was the name. I sipped my drink slowly, trying to blend in. But as I scanned the room, I noticed something else. At a blackjack table not far from me, a younger man was arguing with the dealer. He was red-faced, slurring his words, throwing down chips like they meant nothing. And Russo was watching him. Not directly, not obviously, but every so often, Russo's eyes flicked to the man. Measuring him. I recognized opportunity when I saw it. I walked toward the blackjack table, slipping into the crowd of onlookers. The drunk man slammed his hand down, shouting about how the game was rigged. The dealer stayed calm, but the tension was building. Two of Russo's men moved closer, ready to step in. Before they could, I leaned forward. "Hey," I said gently, placing a hand on the man's arm. "Maybe you should take a break. You don't want to get yourself in trouble here." He blinked at me, confused, but my voice seemed to cut through his drunken haze. He muttered something, shoved his chips toward the dealer, and stumbled away. The crowd dispersed, the tension diffused. And when I glanced back at Russo, I caught him watching me. Not with suspicion. With interest. For the first time, our eyes met. And I smiled. I pretended not to notice him watching me and returned to the bar, my heart hammering but my face calm. If Russo was curious, that was good. Curiosity meant opportunity. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, one of his men, a tall guy in a tailored suit with a scar across his cheek, approached me. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself, just said, "Mr. Russo would like a word." I gave a little shrug, like it was no big deal, even though inside I was shaking. "Lead the way." He guided me across the room, and suddenly all the noise of the casino faded. Russo's table was quieter, calmer, like the eye of a storm. He leaned back in his chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching me with sharp, amused eyes. When I sat down across from him, he didn't speak right away. He let the silence stretch, like he was testing me. "You handled that little scene well," he said finally, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "Most people would have let it blow up. You stepped in." "Why?" I forced a small smile. "Because it was a waste of time." He was drunk, loud, and bad for business. "I figured you'd rather the game keep moving." Russo studied me, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Smart. Most people don't think about my business. They only think about themselves." I tilted my head. "Maybe I'm not most people." For the first time, he smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that made you wonder if you'd just passed a test, or stepped into a trap. "What's your name?" he asked. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "Bella." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Amusement? It was subtle, but I caught it. He knew the name. My name. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Well, Bella. I think you and I might be seeing more of each other." The way he said it made my stomach twist. But I kept my face steady, even as I realized something chilling. Russo didn't just notice me tonight. He already knew who I was. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The way Russo said my name, it wasn't curiosity. It was certainty. He'd been waiting for me. I forced myself to hold his gaze, even as unease crawled up my spine. "Funny," I said, keeping my tone light, "you sound like you've heard of me before." Russo smirked, sipping his drink before answering. "Names travel fast in my world. Especially when they come attached to debts." My blood ran cold. He didn't need to spell it out. He knew exactly who I was, the daughter of the couple who owed him 75 grand and years of excuses. And now, I was sitting across from him like I'd walked into his trap willingly. I had to think fast. Showing fear would kill me. "So," I said, leaning back like I was perfectly comfortable, "you think dragging me into this mess is going to get you what you want?" Russo chuckled softly, but his eyes stayed sharp. "You're bold. I like that. But let's be clear, you're not here because I forced you. You came here on your own." I hated that he was right. He tapped his glass against the table, his tone shifting darker. "Your parents are worthless to me now. But you? You've got potential. Smart, quick on your feet, and apparently brave enough to walk into my casino. That tells me something." "What's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "That you're either the dumbest girl I've ever met," he said, his smile widening, "or you've got something to prove." The men at his table laughed quietly, but Russo didn't. He just watched me, waiting for my reaction. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying but also powerful. He underestimated me. He thought I was a pawn wandering onto his chessboard, not realizing I was already planning to flip it. I gave him the smallest smile, meeting his stare head-on. Maybe a little of both. His laugh this time was genuine, but dangerous. "I like you, Bella. Stick around. I'll find a use for you." As his men shifted, making space for me at the table, I sat down. Outwardly calm, inwardly burning with a single thought. If Russo thought he was going to use me, he had no idea what was coming. The next few weeks blurred into something surreal. I became a regular at La Serrata, always slipping past the velvet curtain into Russo's world. At first, I played the part of the curious outsider, quiet, observant, not asking too many questions. But slowly, Russo let me closer. It started with small things. Fetching drinks at his table. Watching games and spotting cheats, something I turned out to be good at. I had a sharp eye for details, and Russo noticed. "You've got instincts," he told me one night, after I pointed out a man who kept palming chips when he thought no one was watching. His guards dragged the guy out, and Russo gave me a smile that made my skin crawl. Not bad for a college kid. I shrugged like it didn't matter, even though inside I knew it meant everything. Every sliver of trust one gained was a step closer to understanding how he operated. But trust came with risk. The more time I spent in Russo's orbit, the more dangerous it felt. His men didn't talk much, but their eyes were always on me. And Russo himself, he liked to test me. He'd ask questions about my parents, about my studies, about why a girl like me would choose a place like this over campus parties. I lied smoothly, saying I was tired of small lives and small people. Saying I wanted more. And he believed me. Or at least, he pretended to. But I wasn't just watching. I was gathering. I memorized names, faces, routines. I noticed which guards were loyal and which ones were careless. I watched who handled the money, who collected debts, who whispered in Russo's ear. Slowly, I was mapping out the structure of his empire. And the deeper I went, the angrier I became. Because every night, as I sat across from Marcus Russo, I thought about my parents sitting in that house, broken and terrified. I thought about fainting at the university, waiting for them, while they partied and posted about finally enjoying life. I thought about the note with my name on it. And I knew, I wasn't just going to bring Russo down. I was going to make my parents watch as I did what they never could, stand up and fight. By the 4th week, I knew enough about Russo's operation to see its cracks. He was careful, yes, but no empire like his ran flawlessly. The weak points weren't Russo himself, it was the men under him. The ones who handled the dirty work, the ones who got sloppy when they thought no one was watching. One man in particular stood out. Tony Vega. Russo trusted him with the cash flow, which meant he was always moving money in and out of the casino. But Tony had a habit, gambling on the side. Badly. I'd seen him lose more than he won, covering his losses with small adjustments in the books that he thought no one noticed. I noticed. If I could expose Tony, it wouldn't just shake Russo's trust in his right-hand man, it would give me leverage. So, I set my trap. One Friday night, I slipped into the back hallway near the count room, the place where chips were exchanged for cash before being funneled into Russo's accounts. I'd learned that Tony always worked that shift, always alone for at least 20 minutes while guards rotated. I waited until I heard the heavy door click, then pushed it open just enough to watch. Tony was hunched over the desk, counting stacks of bills. And just like I suspected, he pocketed a handful before shoving the rest into the safe. Sloppy. Too sloppy. I pulled out my phone and recorded everything. The moment I had proof, I backed away quietly and slipped into the crowd like nothing happened. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, excitement. For the first time, I had real power in my pocket. The next night, I made sure Russo saw it. I didn't say a word when I slid into my usual spot at his table. I just leaned in and whispered, "Tony's stealing from you." Then I placed my phone face down in front of him. He raised an eyebrow, skeptical. But when he pressed play and saw his loyal man stuffing cash into his jacket, his expression shifted. Cold. Deadly. He said nothing to me. Just gestured for one of his guards, who took the phone and walked away. Minutes later, 2 men disappeared into the back, and Tony never returned. Russo finally looked back at me, smiling faintly. "You've got sharp eyes, Bella." "I like that." I smiled back, hiding the storm inside me. Because what he didn't know was that I wasn't just playing his game. I was getting ready to end it. After Tony disappeared, Russo's trust in me grew faster than I expected. He started inviting me to smaller gatherings, private dinners in back rooms, strategy talks where his closest men argued over numbers and territory. I didn't speak much, but I listened. And listening gave me everything I needed. The key was the money. Russo's empire looked like it was built on power, fear, and loyalty, but in reality, it was built on cash. Every loan, every bribe, every payout had to flow through channels. If I could choke those channels, Russo wouldn't just stumble, he'd collapse. And I knew exactly how to do it. I'd spent weeks gathering details, bank accounts under fake names, businesses acting as fronts, the way Russo's men moved bags of cash into laundromats, restaurants, and nightclubs. I mapped it out, piece by piece, until I saw the whole picture. And then, I contacted the detectives. It wasn't easy. Meeting them in secret, pretending I was still playing along in Russo's world. But when I finally sat down with Detective Hale, the gray-haired one from my parents' house, I laid it all out. Names, dates, accounts, recordings. Proof that could put Russo behind bars for good. Hale looked at me like he couldn't believe I'd pulled it off. "Bella, this is enough to bring down half his operation." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Then do it. But I want to be there when he falls." Hale hesitated. "That's dangerous. If Russo suspects." "He won't," I cut him off. "Not until it's too late." When I walked back into La Serrata that night, I felt different. Stronger. I wasn't the girl who fainted at university, waiting for her parents to show up. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I was the one pulling the strings. And Russo had no idea his empire was already burning beneath his feet. The night it all came crashing down started like any other. Russo sat at his usual table, whiskey in hand, his men gathered around. The casino buzzed with money and laughter, but underneath it, I felt the tension, the calm before a storm only I knew was coming. I slid into my seat across from him, smiling like always. Inside, my chest was tight, but I didn't let it show. "You've been useful, Bella," Russo said, swirling his glass. "Sharp, loyal, you remind me of myself, once." I forced a soft laugh. "Careful, Marcus. Flattery might make me think you trust me." He grinned, leaning closer. "Maybe I do." And that was when the doors burst open. Police stormed the room, guns drawn, shouting commands. Chaos erupted, people scrambling from tables, dealers throwing their hands in the air, guards reaching for weapons only to be shoved to the ground. The entire casino went from laughter to panic in seconds. Russo froze, his sharp eyes flicking toward me. For the first time, I saw it, realization. "You," he hissed, his face twisting. I didn't flinch. "Me." Detective Hale moved through the chaos, his eyes locking on Russo. "Marcus Russo, you're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, extortion, and assault. You're done." Russo's men were dragged away one by one. And as the cuffs snapped around Russo's wrists, he never looked at Hale. He never looked at the cops. He looked at me. "You think this ends me?" he growled. "You'll regret this, Bella." I leaned forward just enough for him to hear, my voice steady and cold. "No. You'll regret ever writing my name on that note." They pulled him away, shouting and thrashing, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, I felt free. Later that night, I walked out of La Serrata and into the quiet street. The neon sign above flickered, powerless now that its king was gone. I thought about my parents, their weakness, their mistakes, the way they had dragged me into this mess. And I realized I didn't need their approval, their love, or their apologies anymore. I had survived on my own. I had fought back. And I had won. For once, the story wasn't about what my parents owed or what Russo wanted. It was about me, Bella. The girl who turned from pawn to player. And I promised myself, never again would anyone decide my worth. Because I had taken my revenge. And I was just getting started.